There we go. Hello, welcome
There we go.
everybody. Before we get cracking with Paul, I want to just say a few words about the new um, analysis platform that we've built for you. Um, all of our partner charities can now log in through makeonline/backend/login, and you'll see it's all changed. We've got a brand new set of analyses. We've got everything that was there before, including the
Oh, there
ability
you
to
are.
see when people are giving pledges, how much people are pledging, and all of the intel so that you can see how effective your marketing and communication campaigns are. But there's more now. You can see when people have started the process, so when people are pledgers who are intending to pledge and getting cracking, but without finishing the process yet. You'll also be able to see some information that we are piping in from Google Analytics, and that is going to show us or show you where people are seeing your messages on the internet and where they're coming in for. So all of this stuff we hope is going to be incredibly valuable to you when you are putting together your gifts in your messaging. Um, and we are going to deliver it all to you for the princely sum of £0 and 0 pence. It's all going to be included in your pay-as-you-go or prepaid wills packages. We want your success to grow. Your success is our success in everything. And on that note, I want to hand over to Paul from Legacy Link, who will help people who have pledged in their lifetime turn gifts in their wills into reality, and talk to you about how lay executors are best communicated with in order to make sure your life is as wonderful as it possibly can be in those circumstances. So, Paul from Legacy Link, take it away. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about the lessons that you've learned over the years and how you can help charities.
Thank you very much, Oliver, for the very kind introduction there. Those of you who don't know me, I'm the head of legacy administration at Legacy Link. And Legacy Link, as you know, provides legacy administration services to 150 charities every month. We're looking after around, I think it's 3,000 cases a year. And we have 55 consultants out there working for various charities across the sector. So that's what I do. And hence, we have a little bit of experience in dealing with lay executors. So what we'll do then, let's get sharing. I'd very much like you to chip in with questions as we're discussing things. Please feel free to do that as we go through the presentation. And I will pop these up now. So you want that one. Hopefully that's the right one there. We've got that right, Marie? Got the right thing? Yeah, excellent stuff. Good, good. Right. Okay. So this is my opening slide is a bit text heavy today, but it's to give you quite a bit of information in our first bit of interaction here. Lay executors is a subject that we've got around 45 minutes. I could probably make a session last 3 days, if we needed to, and we probably wouldn't have covered everything then. Lay executors are a very difficult area, and there is no perfect answer to it. But we have lots of experience in dealing with it, and I'm happy to share some of those kind of good ideas and ways of working with you. I'm going to refer quite a bit to some very in-depth research my group did back in 2022. We interviewed over 500 lay executives who'd been through the process, and asked them about their experience, tried to profile them a little bit, tried to understand the nature of their interaction with the charities through the process. And we had some, shall we say, very interesting feedback, as you will imagine. So what I'll do is I'll refer to this a few times. I'll also give you a link at the end where you can go and have a look at a limited version of this research and download a worksheet that gives you all of these facts and figures for reference for yourselves later on if you weren't part of the original research project. Okay, so let's get stuck in then. What are we talking about here? Very much lay executors come at you from different directions. It will very much depend on how you're notified. Sometimes a lay executor will contact you directly. They will walk into your organization, stand at a reception desk, or walk into a shop and try to hand paperwork over or hand money over, whatever it is. So that's one way they come at you. They will sometimes write to you. if you're lucky, they will call your organization. They will do various ways of getting in touch with you. Then you'll have the batch that don't get in touch with you, and you only find out about when the SME and forward notification comes through. And again, another part of my group there. So SME and forward notifications landing also let you know about lay executors coming in. And then sometimes you will get a notification from a solicitor where a solicitor is just purely helping the executor get the grant probate, and they will often contact you at that point. So you get a wide variety of ways those lay executors are going to approach you, if you like. They're usually closely related to the deceased in some way. In most cases, they will be a friend, they will be a family member, they will be a lifelong solicitor that's looked after their family business, that kind of thing. There will usually be some kind of strong personal connection. And this is something you very much have to bear in mind, even if it's a solicitor. Maybe we're not talking about the executor. I've had many cases where a solicitor has had a lifelong relationship with the deceased, and you very much have to almost treat them like lay executors when you're dealing with them, in the way you must be compassionate and use your empathy to understand what they're going through, the grief they're dealing with. Lay executors as a group tend to fall into three kind of clusters, as far as I'm concerned. They tend to sit somewhere around. You get the cooperative types, the people that when you first contact them, be that they contact you or you write out to them, they're really happy to hear from you. They're grateful for your contact. They're grateful to be able to discuss the deceased. They generally want as much help as they can get with what is a very complex and often overwhelming situation for them to have to deal with. So they're what I classify as the cooperative. They're your ones that are going to be good and helpful to you if you're taking your time through the process. Then there's the austere, and this is quite a carefully chosen word, austere. These are the people that don't really understand why the heck you're talking to them, don't want to talk to you, are actually usually quite upset you've made contact with them, and they can be very, very tricky. These can be some of your most challenging people that you'll deal with in an estate. And then there's the hidden professional. These are generally your retired solicitors, retired accountants, people that know, and I use that phrase advisedly, they know all about the probate process from 20 years ago. They're not up to date. Their attitude can be a little bit tricky, and they can make your life quite complicated because they will have very fixed views about the way estate administration should be done. So you've got these initial communication things. How are you going to find out how to communicate with these people? Because this is the key thing we've got to learn from today, I suspect. Good. Communication. You have your initial contact, as we've discussed. If an executor gets in touch with you, it's very often a good idea to match their communication. I know it's a very basic thing to say, but it's really important that you take the time to understand how they're communicating and why they're communicating with you. Yes, of course, they're communicating with you because of the estate, but why are they writing to you at that point? Why have they notified you? Have they done it because they feel they have to? Have they done it just randomly because they think, oh gosh, I need to tell somebody this is all happening? So you've very much got to understand what and why they're communicating with you. Of the different ways they'll come in contact with you, like I said before, they'll walk in, they'll drop you an email, they'll phone your organisation, or you'll get a SME and forward notification. Now, you've got to consider the best way to approach them at that point. You've really got to decide, what do I do next? And this is going to be a recurring theme all the way through when you're dealing with the executors. You very much, in my experience, should be stepping back from your normal regulated process where you're pumping out a letter on notification, a letter at 12 weeks, a letter at whatever it is, whatever your rules are. I would very firmly suggest that you should put all those rules to one side and tailor your communication in very many ways to the lay executor you're dealing with. Don't treat them as a kind of group that you can easily kind of put standard letters out to, standard emails. Very much consider each case individually. I've been doing this, it's getting on for 15 years now, and I still agonize over every single word, i.e. their email or phone calls. I spend more time preparing for a lay executor phone call than I do for board meetings at Legacy. So it's really important that you take the time to consider who you're communicating with, why you're communicating with them, and by why I mean what do you want to gain from that conversation, and what do you expect to achieve by having that conversation? Okay. And so we'll move on now to one of my favorite phrases in legacy administration. Weniger, aber besser. It's all about doing less, but doing it better. This comes from a German designer who used to work for Browne back in the 70s, I believe it was. And basically, he did a really great thing about less. His whole philosophy about design was less but better. Those of you that are old enough to remember one of these will remember this was a music center. So this was how you played your records in the late 60s, early 70s. So really important to know how big this was a piece of furniture. And what Dieter did was he redesigned it for Browne to this, something much more recognizable today as a record player. If you know what records are, crikey, I'm probably showing my age by making that assumption. But this is what he did. He changed something large, cumbersome, and he turned it into a record player. And this very much illustrates the less but better philosophy. What you should do with lay executors here is very firmly develop a very distinct and different style of communication. Have those different options ready. When you're considering how to communicate them, think about your language, about what you're trying to achieve from the communications there. As an example, if I'm writing to a lay executor I've been notified by SME and Forward about a pecuniary case, I will very often write the most minimal letter possible, or email, whichever it is. I will give condolences, I will give thanks for the gift, and I will say, I'm here if you need to contact me. And I will do no more. I will make no demand of them. I will make no request for information. My initial letter is always very, very basic. Because one thing that came out of the research one of the things that came out of the research from Legacy Foresight was that they didn't feel that charities had a right to be asking. Now, whether that's correct or not, is what a lot of lay executors feel. So I always feel the better way is to open your communication with something very neutral, condolences, thanks, and I'm here if you need me. That gives you an ability, you can send that. Chances of offending someone with that, pretty small. I'm not saying impossible, because it has happened. And then because you don't want to get into a situation where you're sending a first letter that is similar to one of your lawyer letters, solicitor letters, that demands quite a lot. You're asking for copies of documents, you're asking for information on estate values, those kind of things in your solicitor's letters, I would assume, as you write those first. But keeping it simple allows you to then get a gauge. It's a very good gauge of who you're dealing with at the other end, how they respond to that very simple, very non-demanding letter you send them. And you'll be able to identify some of those groups I talked about earlier. The very helpful people, the ones that want to be cooperative, the ones that probably are a little bit more sensitive and a bit more potentially a bit more aggressive. You've got a chance of identifying the way they respond to your initial letter, if they respond at all. And then the hidden professionals will often reveal themselves at this point and say, well, we're not doing anything for 10 months, blah, blah, all this kind of technical mumbo jumbo will come at you from those kind of people. But it's really important your communications are different, separate, and very much considered when you're dealing with a lay executor. It's often worth, really spending the time looking through your stewardship history with this person, understanding what they're, if they've gone through a will writing firm like Oliver's team, whether they've got any history there, whether there's any kind of background you can put in your initial letter. Talk about an event they attended, this kind of thing. So it's really important to go back through your history where you have the opportunity. And this is one of those areas where smaller charities often feel a little bit at a loss when you say compared to an enormous charity like CRUK or Macmillan. This is your opportunity for your relationship management, your stewardship to come through strong, because you will know the person that's died, you will understand their motivations, and hopefully you can share that with an executor or family member that's communicating with you. So it's a really positive potential step. And it also integrates with your in-memory program, which I assume you all have. So this very much, that stewardship angle links that together. And then responding quickly. If a lay executive communicates with you, don't delay in responding to them. Even if your response is very minimal and just thank you very much for your letter, we're looking into this, or whatever you need to do, just make sure you respond to them quickly. Make sure you mirror their approach, as it were. If they drop you an email, pop one straight back. Really take your time to think about these things, but keep in touch with them on the level they're working at. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go out to the breakout rooms. And what I'd like you all to think about And what are your key problem points, be it your problems you have in considering the communication or difficulties you've had in communicating with lay executors. And we'll have a breakout for about 5 minutes now. And if you'd all like to come back and feedback from your breakout rooms, if one person can act as scribe, well, I'd be very grateful. I'm going to whiz off now, Marie.
Yeah, I'm just creating those now. I just need to move.
So while we're waiting for that, have a little consider about, what are your minimum standards? What have been your key problem areas? Any experience of particularly tricky lay exec?
Okay, I'm going to open all rooms.
Wonderful.
Super. Shall we hop in,
Yeah, hop around.
Marie, just for the,
I
and you can
jump
call
into
us out
room
for 5
three.
minutes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Shall I jump into room 3 and then work my way back? Yeah.
Okay. I'll go into room 4, which has only got 2 people at the moment.
Yeah.
All
Right,
right,
so
see you in a bit.
can you do
And
that
you could,
yourself then, yeah?
yeah. And yes,
Okay, just
Marie, Elizabeth, and Laura, you can give them a monologue.
room four's only got 2 people in.
Yeah,
Shall
I'm
I
going into
move?
that one.
All right, okay.
Super. See you in a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Template of that somebody would be passing over. And we don't have, okay, someone's come in, this is your template response that you've obviously got to customize, but I haven't seen those things. I don't know what you're finding.
Yeah, so I've literally sort of been there sort of about 8 weeks. I'm still trying to sort of get my head around what I need to be doing, but I'm also sort of individual giving as well. And we've just had a mailing go out, so I'm just kind of like in the middle of sort of doing bits and pieces. So yeah, trying to get my head around sort of legalities and wording and mailings and bits and pieces. So I'm kind of yeah, just sort of at the very beginnings of like interacting with people.
That makes sense.
You know what I mean? It's just kind of that yeah. And they sort of already had sort of activities in place. So I'm kind of coming in at a time when sort of there's a bit of change within the team and just sort of trying to take over bits and pieces. So yeah, it's been
Question for
interesting
you, Emma.
though. Yes.
Do you know what you would do if you got, after this meeting, phone rang, or you opened an email and it said so and so's just died. They've left a gift of X% of their estate to MRF. Do you know what you would do?
No, that's actually what I was just saying to Emma, is that I've started in like legacy and in MEM, and it's not written down anywhere. So I've just had something come in and I'm like, right, but what's the process? Where's your journey that you've mapped out for me that I do these steps? And obviously you've got to customize each step, but it would be really helpful to have, this is a template email, here's a paragraph you need to customize with the feed, the insight from your database. Then you need to go back to them about this. And if they ask about specific projects that their legacy has named, because we're a health charity, and they want to invest in a certain type of healthcare, then where do I go to find out? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, as in, I think that's what I need to build up on, because the timely response is quite important. What's your perspective, Emma, if you've got that?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of sort of, because we're both sort of in a health related charity. I think I'm quite lucky in what you've just mentioned, sort of wanting money to go to a certain area, and we sort of have different funds, but we can direct people to.
Yeah.
So I think sort of on that basis, luckily I've walked into a lovely charity and they have like a massive business manual of like fundraising. So they've got all of their templates sort of already sort of set out and bits and pieces. But in a previous role, I was sort of in charge of MEM fundraising.
Yeah.
So I kind of have a little bit of a all right start, but yeah, if you know what I mean, it's kind of a slight sort of, it's obviously different language but yeah, trying to understand sort of what things need to be done.
Question for Katie. When you said you had something come in, was that notification of a gift that after someone had died, or was that notification that someone's pledging and wants to leave a gift in their will?
Somebody's died and they have died before I started, so it's already
Yeah.
in the system. But now the lay
Plausible deniability. Good.
yeah, and now either the lay executors or the family, I'm still trying to find out now, want to know what we're going to do with the legacy. Great question.
Perfect.
Great opportunity
Yeah.
to go back and engage.
Yeah.
And I'm confident in speaking to people. I think the bits that I'm less confident about is the specific information that my charity wants me to communicate to them at certain points, and that's that I want to try and this is really helpful, because I think what I need to do
Perfect
is
timing.
back up that journey from insights from today.
And are you aware of the responsibilities of the charity when it comes to, was it a gift of a fixed sum, or is it a gift of a percentage of some of the estates?
Fixed sum.
So they've let fewer duties on the charity, which is great.
I don't know anything about the duties on the charity, so I'm going to put that down as well.
But if it's a percentage sum, you've got a really potentially awkward interaction with the executors saying, "Oh, that's wonderful. Show me the estate accounts," so that we can see that their percentage is correct, and that you're reporting properly, and you've not disappeared any of the known assets. You know, the Rolex watch has gone missing and not been included in the. So it can be quite delicate in some of those conversations. But when it's fixed sum, you just need to make sure that a check eventually arrives with the charity.
I'm writing that down. That's why I'm looking this way. But yeah, I think
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's but yeah, the Paul is by far and away one of the most experienced people in the country when it comes to getting the tone right with executors. So who's been scribing? I'm not sure I'm allowed to speak after the session if our group
I'm happy to do it.
take away.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
We've got 45 seconds. Great. Well, it's really good timing that this session's on there, Katie, and it'll be really interesting to see what takeaways you can actually put into reality. And Emma, welcome to the MRF. I know you have done loads of the charity's done loads of stuff nationally over the last
Yeah, the
year, so
charity's
really
got sort
great
of a
time to
really sort
join.
of good sort of legacy bits going
Yeah,
on, so I've kind of walked in and panicked.
The manual sounds absolutely invaluable. I don't know whether would be a resource for other people in Legacy Loop if people wanted to pick up the phone and ask a question about what you do. Ooh.
Welcome back. Wonderful.
Okay, so we had some quite interesting conversation going on in the group I was in. So anybody got any points they'd like to bring out of those breakouts? So let's start with group one. Anyone that was in that first group?
Yeah,
I think
sorry, go on.
That was Christina.
Yeah, it was great actually to chat, and that I've been working in legacies for a number of years, but other colleagues, it was literally that new to the role, and back from maternity leave at the beginning of the week. So actually, it was not that we had experience of working with lay executors, but actually really being very receptive to all of the guidance that you've given us to make it as a satisfactory and a beneficial relationship, and certainly from Emma and the team talking about working collaboratively across the charities for mutual benefit of everybody, and recognizing that joint voice is so much stronger in Emma and Melissa was talking, sorry, Holly was talking about hospice and the upcoming September hospice awareness, and how that can be really helpful in messaging across general public of the benefit of that sector, and how that might actually impact on making the lay executors aware of the benefit of the charitable giving that's being made.
That's a really important point you picked up on, is that the wider context of legacy administration. You're dealing with the whole organization and their lifetime relationship with that person. Great, thank you. Anybody else want to chip in with some, maybe from one of the other groups? Anybody got anything to add? No? Okay, well, we were talking our talk was very similar to yours about the wider implication. But then there's been the time and demands on you as staff members dealing with the lay executors, dealing with the family around the death. And I think it's again a really important consideration that your charities have to see the value in what you're doing and understand that the stewardship is part of the legacy administration process, particularly when it comes to lay executors and family. If you're a hospice or whatever it is, you really have those very strong, very interesting. Don't apologise. It's absolutely fine. So yeah, it's really important that you do that. Just well, I'll pop another slide back up. If anything else comes to mind from those groups that you want to discuss, just pop it in as we're chatting along, because I'm just looking at the clock and watching it very carefully for making sure we get through the appropriate bits. Right, let's pop back to my slideshow so I can get you all with that. There we go. Great. Okay, so what you're seeing there is a quick summary of what we were saying before and some of the things that have come out through our discussions there. Make sure, these are kind of key things to remember with lay executors. Have a separate set of email or letter templates. Just create those so you don't have to reinvent the wheel each time, but make them broad so that you can then take bits in and out depending on the situation you're facing. But have a distinct style, a distinct language, a distinct way of communicating with lay executors for your charity. Especially if you're like a hospice or you have some kind of very focused cause, really make sure they reflect that and the person's involvement in that historically. Again, make sure, like we were talking again, you came out in your points, you're sharing the history, you understand the history of that person with your organisation. I get really cross when people say, oh, we don't know 50, 60% of our legacy givers. Yes, you do, you just haven't recorded it properly. So they haven't given to you randomly out of the blue in most cases. The vast majority will have had some relationship. And it does, again, it makes me a little bit cross sometimes, charities I work with and say, oh, we don't know them. Yes, you do. You really do. They must be given to you for a reason. So it's really important that you take that into account and look at your stewardship history carefully. Like I said before, keep the responses fast, keep them, even if you're just sending a holding response, make sure that communication is maintained with the lay executors. And then flipping back to the research we did back in 22, the research project, feedback was not great in terms of communication. The lay executors as a rule felt very isolated. They felt that charities were just after the money. Now, this may be unfair, but it was the feedback that we got from this very large research group we found. So again, you've got to keep this in mind. How are you going to be perceived? And this applies to all of your communication. It's the perception of your communication is as important as the meat of what you actually say. How is the lay executor going to feel when they receive your communication? Is it going to feel like you're actually just chasing money? Don't say things like, I only write 2 and then ask them 3 things. Don't do it. People do it all the time and it's so frustrating. It's such poor communication skills. So just think about what you're doing. If you say, I'm only writing 2, then only do that. Things like that. Just keep it in mind. All right. Any questions before we move on? No? Okay. Next one. Timings. Right. This is one that, again, there's a lot of form out there with legacy officers who like working by rote. They like doing the same thing every time on every case. Don't stick to rigid communication schedules with lay executors. Chuck them out the window. Forget what your requirements are. Yes, you'll have review requirements you have to do, but please don't put your communication on that schedule. Make sure your communication is considered. Is it appropriate? Is it a good time in the administration process? Those with professional legacy officers, you'll know where the estate is moving along, how it's getting along with people. Where is it? Has the property sold? Are we still resolving assets? Is there any point in harassing a lay executor at this point? Because you've got to remember, these lay executors have lives. They have jobs. They're maybe taking the kids to school, going to work, coming back, collecting the kids, getting home, cooking dinner, finally sitting down with a glass of wine in the evening and, I've got to do Auntie's estate. Oh, and there's a 3-page email from a charity annoying me greatly right now. Just think about the impact of your communication, the timing of it. They're going to be hitting these when they're tired, potentially, when it's not their focus, it's not their expertise. Really consider that when you're communicating with them. Keep your communication tight and tailored to that person you're communicating with. And then it's the old classics. Really be careful of anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas, religious holidays of any kind, really be appreciative of it. Think of the religious requirements, of various religions that you're going to be dealing with and taking estates through. They can be considerably different. If you come from a Christian background, then you really do have to take the time to understand the way the estates are processed, with other religious demands. They can take much longer. They can involve many more people. Funeral costs can be much greater for certain religions. I mean, I do pick them out, but Jewish funerals tend to be very, very expensive. And they will often include travel for family to be brought to the country for the funeral. So your costs, your expectations of costs should be different. Your expectations of the timings, the way things are done, need to be different depending on the religion. I've had a particular estate in India where we had to get an Indian grant and things like that. And it was hugely time intensive and demanding to get it done. And again, you have to reset your expectations, your management's expectations, and again, capture your communication to suit the timings of the estate, not your particular demands. And here's a couple of examples from the research that they're happy for me to share. This is feedback from lay executors getting it right. So the charity contacted me 6 months after first contact. Okay, so they obviously sent an initial and then just very politely asked for an update. But then the next one, you can see the opposite side. Charity wrote to us, reminding people of their responsibilities and that they could be prosecuted if they didn't comply with these responsibilities. Now, I'm guessing that's someone that comes, potentially writing from a legal background. Maybe the lay executor wasn't perfect in communicating with them, but we do have to bear this in mind. Everything we do, how is it going to be perceived? Maybe the letter wasn't meant like that. We've all had cases, I suspect, where you've written a perfectly polite, simple letter and just got this roar of anger and grief back at you. And it's really considering every single thing. What is my tone? What would I read in this letter? What would I think was the driving force behind it? So because that's what the lay executor in most cases will do. They will look at your letter and go, are they just demanding the money here? That's the kind of thing you have to think about, and tone your letters and couch your letters in language that really does make it clear you are literally just staying in touch. If you choose to communicate with them at a review point, reviews don't have to mean take action. Reviews can just mean read the file, check the file. Where am I? Should I be doing anything at this point? And that's the thing. Should I be doing it? Be pragmatic, be proportional. Think about what you're doing. And it's especially powerful for lay executors. Okay. Next, bumps in the road. Now, the bumps in the road are many and various. So there can be problems in terms of a legal sense. There can be claims. There can be misinterpretations of wills. I'm always remarkably surprised how often lay executors misunderstand the simple wording in a will. There are plenty of complicated ones they seem to get absolutely right. And then the really simple ones, they just seem to misunderstand. So, think about these things, how best to approach it. Do they understand the legal implications of their role? Whilst I don't want to go waving a big stick at a lay executor, it's very important that they understand they are responsible. And whilst they have the powers granted to them by being the executor, it doesn't make them more powerful. They can't make decisions. They can't change the context of a will. In many cases, as many of them would. It's not within their gift to give £5,000 to the next door neighbour for looking after the cat for 2 weeks, which is my regular favourite. That happens on a remarkably regular basis. When it comes to claims, what is the nature of the claims? Are you getting into a family battle here? Is there a tension within the family that you are not clearly aware of? It's often a good point to remind them that they don't have to do this alone. It's not a specialism for them. It's not something they've done before in most cases. It's perfectly acceptable for them to appoint a solicitor for help or an accountant to do the tax or whatever it is they need. And I found that's one of the most surprising things is when you say to them, well, if you're struggling with this, why don't you appoint a solicitor? And they kind of go, can I do that? Well, yes, you can. Don't assume they understand. I say this when I'm talking about estate administration in general, and even with the lack of probate professionals out there, a lot of people we end up dealing with really aren't experienced in dealing with estates. They may be being pulled in from the property department to do a bit of probate. So especially think of that when you're dealing with lay executors. They have no expertise. They have no experience in most cases. So make sure you remind them that it's perfectly okay to take some professional help on. Doesn't mean giving up, because, you know, again, something that came out of the research was your estate, doing the estate is a badge of honour for them. You know, if they've been appointed, very often lay executors feel it's a solemn duty they have to perform, and they want to do as much as possible. But reminding them that they can take some help without handing it over. They can get some help on IHT. They can get some help on, you know, dealing with any claims and so forth. So, you know, do remind them of that, but be supportive and be clear in what you need, when you need to get to it. The other thing is just do remind yourself what you're actually entitled to from the states. I all too often hear stories from their executors of charities demanding this and that, this documentation, that documentation, this subtlety in a report. You know, there will be, if a lay executor has 12 charities, when they ask a question, they'll often get 12 completely different answers. So, you know, if you're working with other charities, make sure you coordinate your responses to a lay executor. It's particularly important to get a lead charity in place if you're dealing with a lay executor, so one voice communicates, and that the lay executor is not overwhelmed with constant different or subtly different queries on the estate that are perfectly reasonable, I'm sure, from the legacy officer's chair, but you must make sure you're not asking the same question 12 different ways at 12 different charities. So do keep that in mind, and particularly when it comes to the tax, you know, offer assistance, offer guidance, but, you know, suggest to them they can get professional help if they need it. So, and the legal issues, well, we all know contentious claims, despite the noise that is generated by certain people out there, they're not increasing at any significant rate. There is a tiny statistically, I said that properly, statistically insignificant rise, but it could just be an anomaly in the numbers. According to my friends over at Foresight, there is no significant change in the number or type of contentious cases. And I'd say contention is the one thing as professional legacy officers we're all completely clued up and geared on how to deal with. It's not something any professional legacy officer should fear, is a contention on a case. We have lots of great professional support. There's lots of professional support in terms of the Institute of Legacy Management, of which I'm a director. There's lots of support and paperwork on there you can go to. But when it comes to dealing with your lay executors, just be confident and don't fear contention. It's something you really should not worry about. Okay. And here's a really interesting point. What is actually needed? Very, very often I hear these stories about from lay executors that this charity wanted a copy of a window cleaning receipt, or, you know, weren't really happy about paying for flowers at the funeral from the estate. Now, I know the legal position on that, so do you. But actually, do you really want to be the charity that's remembered by the lay executor because you objected to the cost of a headstone or the flowers at the funeral? No, you really don't want that, because that lay executor will go away from that conversation and tell everyone they know. So when you're dealing with a lay executor, again, think of everything in context. If you're tempted to ask for a piece of information, right, can I get this some other way? Can I get it from a COBEN? Can I get it from public record? Can I do a bit of Googling? This kind of stuff. Is there any way you can get that piece of information without asking the lay executor? That's something to consider. And I'll go back to my standard things here. Is it pragmatic to ask that question? Ask for that piece of information. Is it proportional to the issue you're facing? If we're talking about a query over in the estate accounts over £23, do you really want to damage your charity's reputation by asking for loads of detail on the 23 quid cost that's gone? I'm not saying you shouldn't, I'm just saying you should consider very carefully whether it is proportional and appropriate to do them. Things like property reports, again, make sure that you're asking once and you're clearly stating why you need it. You're not doing it for fun. You're not doing it to wind them up, to expend money from the estate. You're doing it because you're required to do it as part, potentially as part of an appropriation or something of that nature. Make sure they understand and try not to be condescending when you're explaining it. That's the important thing. Again, as always with lay executors, it's finding a balance. Deliver the information as simply and concisely as you can, or a question if you have to make a question. And then what do you actually need in terms of estate accounts? You know, are you prepared as a charity to accept a copy of maybe the estate administration account? So I very often have, get given half a dozen bank statements that somebody has hand annotated. And with a little bit of effort, you can make that work as a set of estate accounts. You don't need a formal separate document necessarily. You just have to be content, in my view, on how you, especially when it comes to lay executors, you just have to be content that the estate has been administered properly. And if you've got information, you've got a grant of probate, you've maybe got a copy of an IHT form if it still comes to you these days, you can work your way through. You can get the information you need without being too officious and demanding in the way you do that. And then it comes to our old favourite, the IHT calculations. Again, when you're dealing with this, it is something that very often goes wrong. It is something that usually, I have to say the worst case scenario is always they distribute, then send you their version of the account, then you realise it's wrong and money's got to move around. You've really got to do careful consideration again as to whether it is proportional to get the estate redistributed, collect money back in, push money back out, that kind of stuff. You've got to think about that. And whilst it may be unpleasant to have to just sit back and maybe take a hit on an estate, I think it's one of those things that a lot of charities should really consider before they start pushing too hard. Because just because you can do something, there's really got to be the question, should I? Because what damage are you doing to your reputation with that lay executor? What damage are you doing to the reputation of charities in general? You can really do quite a lot of damage by just asking one question inappropriately or unnecessarily. So, you're often balancing the lay executors, you're balancing your legal, rights, for want of a better word, against the reality of what it's going to be like dealing with those issues. And finally, with lay executors, where's the value to your charity? It's about the future relationship. It's about making their experience so pleasant, so compassionate, so thoughtful that they consider you going forward. There's on the first slide there's some stats, and you can get them on the report as well, but a lot of lay executors claim to be supporters of charities when they first start doing an estate administration. And they will be aware of it. They will be aware of the deceased desire to leave to the charity. So you're then thinking, well, how do we get to the end of an estate where a lot of lay executors are generally viewing charities quite negatively, especially ones that they originally started off supporting? So you have to consider, what is the effect of what I'm doing on this person? What is the effect on the reputation and stature of my charity in this person's eyes? Because they potentially 70% claim to be a supporter of your charity in these lay exec estates. But when they get to the end, it's a very different picture. So you have to consider, what is legacy administration doing to your relationship with that lay executor? And more importantly, the wider sector, what is it doing to legacy giving? So you really have to consider that. Obviously, you do not make an ask of any kind. You can offer tours, offer updates on how the money's being used, that kind of thing, but you cannot. It was fundamentally across the board. Everyone that responded said no asks are appropriate at any point in the process. So no giving asks at all. Not even a hint of one was deemed acceptable by the lay executors survey. So that's a choice you can make yourselves, but I would strongly suggest you listen to the results of the research. Because if you do this right, you gain a family unit. You can potentially gain a family as a supporter. You can gain them as a future donor by making the legacy administration process as comfortable and smooth as possible for them. So one to very much keep in mind. And then let's close with a couple of resources. There's a couple of links there. One is let me stop sharing there and share something else. Very quickly, I appreciate the clock is running. Here we go. So there's a couple of links here. So you will see the Institute of Legacy Management has an excellent page with information for lay executors. You can point this. This is available to everyone. It's not paywalled. So if you have professional executors that are struggling, you can point them here, lay executors. And there's lots of free advice and help. And even if you are a relatively inexperienced legacy officer, this can be really helpful. Gives you a document checklist of what a lay executor should provide you. Helps you knowing what the bare minimum is you can ask for. So if you're don't be embarrassed. If you want to have a look, go and have a look and just get that information from there. There's also a link on there to where you can download a copy of the report we did back in 2022. I would strongly suggest you do so. Download even that minimal version of the report, and it will give you lots of actionable ideas to take forward in dealing with lay executors. And then last but not least, a nice plug for Legacy Link, who I work for. We provide legacy administration support for everyone out there in the sector. We're currently doing it for, as I say, over 150 charities. I've got 55 people out there of varying levels of knowledge, experience, and working with different types of charity. We also provide a legacy help desk, which I'll just share with you there. This is a free service where if you've got a question you want to ask on a case but aren't sure where to go, if you submit a ticket here, either me or my lovely partner, Freya Ellingham, will provide you with a response to a question you have, and we can help you move forward on a particularly tricky case if you have one you would like to share with us. But that is the end. Any questions from anyone that immediately leap to mind? I'll be sharing those slides for the links and so forth, so don't worry.
So I can see one in the chat, Paul. So first of all, thank you very much for that, and thank you for directing to those resources, both free and well, the free ones with legacy management, and also the free ones with Legacy Link. Worth mentioning that if anybody, there's lots of fundraisers who also look after legacy management. It's really worth saying that if you ever have any knotty problems around legacy administration, pick up the phone. You're very welcome to call us at Make a Will Online, but we specialize in the will preparation. Paul has a very, very good service, so do use it. And there's a question in the chat, and it says, are estates with lay executors increasing over time? So that's your starter for 10.
No? They blipped after COVID. They blipped during and after COVID because people had felt they wanted to take estates on at that point. But they essentially stayed where they've always stayed, the percentage of lay executors. So you haven't got more coming.
What proportion of gifts in wills tend to have lay executors? Sorry if you already said that.
No, I haven't, and it's a really good question that no one's got a definitive answer for at the moment.
Okay.
I don't have a stat on that one, unfortunately, but it's a relatively low number. I seem to remember when we looked at it last, it was around the 20% mark as a top end. Most charities, it's a lot lower than that.
So, only accounting for £800 million worth of charity revenue each year.
4 billion it's worth, isn't it? Apparently, according to my lovely friends over at Legacy Foresight. So, yeah.
Yes. Next question in the chat. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that first one. Rosalind, next question in the chat is, when you get no response after a few communications, presumably this is after a SME and forward notification, what should you do? Asking for a friend, maybe. Who knows?
Absolutely. Yeah, no worries, no worries. Basically, the way I would approach it normally is, first thing is, how much is the gift? If it's under, £250, you've probably spent the gift already trying to communicate with them in your time alone. So you have to approach it very pragmatically and maybe say, I leave this one, now I close the file, and we're essentially writing it off. Because there's a moral argument, we should have the money, but actually, in reality, you're going to spend more money as a charity chasing it down. If it's of significantly more value, I normally say about £2,000 up. If it's a £2,000 value up, then what I would do is I would send a recorded delivery version of my letter and to ensure that I know it's got there. Then if that doesn't work, there are lots of services available from Ireland's corporate partners called Legacy Recovery, where the firm's solicitors will charge you a fixed fee somewhere between £250 and £350, and they will send a series of letters for that agreed fee. So a legal letter is remarkable in shaking gifts loose. Oh, I completely forgot. I thought I paid you, but they wouldn't respond to you, but they'll suddenly respond to a legal letter. So it's a relatively small cost for the solicitors to take on that role of insulation for you. They're separating you from you making that very demanding step of threatening them, essentially, by sending a legal letter. So if you do that, do it. The legal firm's name is on the letterhead, not yours. So it protects you, and it's a relatively small amount of money to get that in. But again, even allowing for the amounts and so forth, just consider, is it necessary and appropriate? Yeah, any more?
Thank you very much. Has anybody else got any questions in the chat? If not, I I'll jump in. But has anybody else got any questions for Paul? You're welcome to unmute and speak up or pop something in the chat. In the meantime, you kind of touched on it in your last answer. Oh, sorry, kind of touched on it in your last answer, Paul. You spoke about amounts that people have left.
Yeah.
When somebody has left, increasingly charity legacy fundraisers are asking for, a small percentage of an estate, or, when it's an unknown portion of the estate, can you just touch on quickly the legal duties that a charity has, just so that the people in our community are aware of what you have to do as a charity where there's a residual gift?
Well, there's a residual gift. The answer is you have to, when you receive a residual gift, you have to be able to prove that you've got the amount you're due. There are lots of other, fancy words and things you can add to this, but essentially it comes down to proving your gift. So when it's a residual estate, you'll absolutely have to have a copy of the will on file. Normally a grant of probate, you'll get that from the SME and forward service if you subscribe. So those two are kind of usually ticked off. Where they don't occur is where the estate doesn't have to go to probate. If it's financially very small, there are certain circumstances where you don't need a grant of probate, then you're going to be flying a little bit blind and will only know about the estate if the executor tells you. And in that scenario, it's going to be a relatively small amount of money. So getting a copy of the will is usually then you have to go via the executor and hope for the best, because it's not going to end up as a public document. What you need on top of that is some form of final accounting. So you need the exact quote from, I can't remember which act it is, but it's a full and perfect final accounting. Is what you're entitled to as a residual beneficiary. So what you're looking for there is a set of accounts, as I kind of briefly touched on, whatever form they take, because there is no standardized format. A set of accounts that show you all of the money that's come into an estate and all of the money that's gone out, and does that process comply with what the will says? Because, at the very base of things, you are there to protect the wishes of the deceased. You're the last defender, as it were, if you want to give yourself a bit of motivation like I do. I always consider myself the last defender of the deceased wishes. So it's like you have to make sure that the amount of money your charity has received is equivalent to what the deceased wanted in their will. So keep that in mind. And that's really it, because you as a charity have to be able to give your formal receipt. The executor is entitled to a receipt, and this can often be quite a good lever for getting estate accounts. If they're saying, I want my receipt, I want to be discharged, you say, well, you can have that when I can have the final set of estate accounts, because I have a statutory duty to report this in my charity's accounts. And there's some quite good to and fro you can get, but actually the amount of information you need is relatively small in a finite sense, unless sometimes you might want a property report if there's an appropriation going down. But in short, it's will, grant of probate, final estate accounts, and then if there's shares or if there's property, you might need some additional information. But the short version is will, grant, estate accounts, and then you can be content the estate has been administered correctly, and you can then provide your formal receipt as a charity, but not an indemnity. Don't ever give indemnity.
Any more questions from the room? If not, I've got one very, very last question, then we can wrap up. So any questions from the room? No. So just going back to our breakout room, really, Paul, I was in a room with two officers who are fairly new in post. And just wants to distill the last hour down into one action to take, one takeaway for somebody who is maybe being notified of a supporter's death, or notified of a gift by its being forwarded by an executor, or potentially by an executor for the first time. What is the one takeaway, one thing to bear in mind, one action that should be taken to start off in the right direction?
Yeah, I'd open this up by saying I love being a legacy officer. It is the best job I've ever had. So please, any comments I make, take that in that view. I love being a legacy officer. I think it's the most valuable thing I've ever done in my life. What should a new legacy officer do? What should they take away from this? Be careful. Take your time and communicate. Communication is everything when it comes to legacy administration, whether it's a lay executor or a professional. It's all about communication. It's all about ensuring that you can project your charity's image as strongly as possible and as positively as possible, whilst doing something quite demanding. So it's about taking the time to centre yourself and consider every communication really carefully. And it can be as much your communication internally to your managers, your directors, your trustees, having the confidence to carefully communicate that it's not appropriate for your charity to chase something today or next month. Just being confident when you're new to this, get your feet and understand where you are and just communicate that really carefully and confidently to everyone that you're dealing with in the legacy administration process.
Super. Paul, I can't thank you enough for giving up your time today. I know how busy you are with the 60 odd offices and 100 and something charities. I really genuinely appreciate your wise words around this area, which does have to be dealt with such delicacy. And everybody who's taken time out of your day today to join our legacy loop, thank you very much indeed. The next one will be in May. We'll follow up, and all of the links that Paul's shared, all of those contact details, we're going to circulate after. And if you do have a sticky question, check the links, check the free resources, and then have a chat with Legacy Link. There's so much more, as Paul said, that he could have said, but that's a really great takeaway from today. Thank you all. Right. I better stop this recording, otherwise Marie will get all of my chuntering.